Hey everyone, welcome to this month's Flash Fiction. I have been a little quiet online, so I want to apologize about that first, but it's all for good purpose. Mostly working on getting the White Hand ready to go and writing some additional fiction that will be coming in the following months. But I haven't forgotten about Flash Fiction, and here we are today. This particular story is quite fascinating to me because it's based off of supposed events that I've talked to about locals at here in Edmonton about Mercer Warehouse and people who have actually worked in the building. Apparently the place is haunted. So I was really inspired by it to elaborate more on the actual haunt itself and the spirit that is haunting the building. So this whole story is about that, on kind of a adaptation of what happens there based off of the stories and witnesses that have mentioned the haunt. So let's jump into it and see what kind of frights we get. Mercer Warehouse Haunt. Just one more email, I thought while hammering away at my keyboard. The night was getting on. Most people had left the building. I was probably one of the last ones at the office. Well, that and Startup Edmonton space on the floor above. They often hosted events after hours for their entrepreneur community. It was pretty cool if you were going down the business person route. For me, even in a small studio, I didn't have that go-getter attitude that everyone seems to have around me. All I want to do is clock in, do my job, and get home. I also wasn't a fan of the big corporate factory. So, unfortunately, I am part of a small team, which meant overtime. Footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the office. "Mark!" came a man's nasally voice, easily recognizable as my coworker Gabe. "Yeah?" I called out to him, still typing rapidly on my keyboard. Gabe appeared from around the corner, his frizzy hair bouncing with each step he made. "How's the event upstairs?" I asked, clearly able to hear the muffled voices of the people upstairs mingling. The wooden floors weren't that soundproof. "Good. You should have joined. Some potential hires if we get big enough." I'm sure Todd would love to hear that. I used my trackpad and hit send on the email. Leaning back in my chair, I pushed my glasses up and looked at my colleague who stared back at me. "They're wrapping up the event. Alice and I thought we could go down to Mercer Tavern for some drinks. You in?" Gabe asked. I looked down at my computer screen to see one half of the screen had the email software open with over 24 unread emails from today. The other half was a Word document I was working on before the blast of emails arrived at the end of the workday. As tempting as it was to go get piss-faced with my coworkers after a long shift, I knew I couldn't. The fact that our office was on the same building as a pub didn't help the temptation either. The Mercer Warehouse was a fantastic historical structure. "I would love to go, but I got a pile of work to do here," I said, brushing my slick back hair aside. I really didn't want to stay and work, but I knew better. "Save it for tomorrow," Gabe said with a toothy grin. "You know Todd would have my head if this briefing isn't written for the dev team. I got to get this done." Footsteps came from down the hall until a third person entered the room. Alice, the brunette intern we hired. Damn. That's really the best way to describe her. I tried not to stare at her hips, wrapped into a tight skirt, as she walked. I had workplace ethics. "Mark," Alice said. "What are you still doing here?" she asked in a playful tone. I waved my hand at the laptop. "Just getting this work done. There's a lot we haven't even gotten through." "Told you," Gabe said. "Mark just can't look away from that screen." Alice smiled at me and shook her head. "Don't work too late, okay?" I smiled at her. "Yeah." As if the pub wasn't tempted enough, I thought. I'd been so wrapped up in work that I didn't know Alice had stayed at the Startup Edmonton event. I'd love to get out for a drink with her. A loud thud came from upstairs, causing the three of us to jump. "Christ," Alice said while placing her hand on her chest. Gabe scratched his mustache, saying, "Someone has had too many drinks up there." I shook my head. That sounded like it was on this floor. "Anyone else still here?" "Not that I'm aware of," Alice said, while waving her hand to create a slight breeze. Who knows, Gabe said. This place is full of sounds throughout the day, just extra spooky at night. I unbuttoned the upper button of my shirt and exhaled, feeling whatever heat wave Alice was getting. For whatever reason, the building's furnace decided it was a good idea to crank the floor with warmth. This place was getting close to being 100 years old. Who knows what kind of quirks it has? Between the original brick walls, the wood floors, elevators, various floors, and many rooms, this place was as mysterious as when my clock-out time was going to be. Okay, someone blasted the heat, Alice said, waving her hand. Probably one of those ghosts in the building, Gabe said. What? Alice asked. There's no ghosts here. She looked at me for confirmation. I shrugged at her. I have no idea about the history of this place. Gabe scratched his head. I swear, there was something about a fire in this place when it was a stable. Tragic. A stable? I snorted. This is a brick building with 4 floors. Doesn't exactly look like one. Gabe shook his head. Look, that's all I've been told. People talk about it here all the time. I never heard anything like that, I said. Me either, Alice said. Maybe it's just small talk, Gabe said. Look, it's getting way too hot in here. I'm going for a cool drink. Alice nodded. Maybe if you're done early, come find us downstairs, she said before turning to leave. Thanks, I said. Gabe waved goodbye at me. Remember to lock up when you're done. Of course. Have a drink on me, I called out as he left the office space. Gabe gave me a thumbs up as he walked out of our office and down the wooden hallway, leaving me with my work. At least I presumed I was alone on the floor. What was that thud noise? I wasn't sure if it was worth investigating or not. Probably wasn't. Being overworked and tired had a way of making you paranoid. Plus, I had so much work to do that I didn't see taking a break was very optional. Maybe a piss break at some point, but that's all. I continued to hammer away at the keyboard, working on the creative brief document for the development team. At this point in the day, I'd probably been at work for a good 12 hours. Time seemed to be an abstract concept while my eyes watched the digital alphabet glyph pop up on my screen with each key I pressed. When did Alice and Gabe come by? An hour? Or 2 hours ago? I honestly couldn't remember. I entered a trance, a mundane work trance. I could use that beer, I thought. The temptation of joining my co-workers at the Mercer Tavern below was rising again. Piss break. I got up from my seat while hitting the save button. A stretch and bathroom break wouldn't hurt anyone. I was making good progress and deserved a break. Time didn't matter at this point. No matter how late or early I left, no one cared as long as the work got done. Some heavy walker in high heels began to stomp on the floor above. Jesus, I muttered to myself while checking the time on my smartphone. It was about midnight. The heat in the building hadn't exactly cooled off either. Now that I wasn't glued to my computer screen, I could focus on the temperature. I was unsure if it was getting hotter or if I was paying attention to it now. Regardless, I had pit sweats now. That's attractive, especially to Alice. I walked out of our office and down the hall towards the restroom. All of the other office doors were now shut and locked. Everyone else had gone home for the day. I really was the last one on this floor, possibly the building, minus the tavern below. Another stomp came, reverbing off some of the empty walls. The sound was more substantial than the high heel, like a pole hitting the ground. It was close, more level than the ceiling. That wasn't the floor above, I thought, knowing well off that the startup Edmonton event ended hours ago. It's gotta be the old pipes. Sighing, I brushed the strange sound out of my head and went for the bathroom. On this floor, it was a shared one stall. Sure, there were 2 stalls, but both of them were in the hall, facing away from each other. This building tended to be forward-thinking and introduce shared bathrooms. I didn't lose my shit over it like some people. To me, when you have to go, you have to go. Entering the bathroom, I flicked the light on, put my phone on the counter, and closed the door. Lifting the toilet lid with my foot, I undid my pant buckle and took care of business. Relief. The moment passed. Flushed, lid dropped. Thud. The sound outside the bathroom came and caused me to jump, and I snagged my pants to keep them up. Thud, thud. The bathroom door pounded, its entire shape pushed inward with each pound it made. "Cut it out," I called out. It had to be Gabe pulling some stupid prank. Thud, 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 came the sound from behind the door again. The temperature drastically increased, and I could feel sweat dripping down my face. A snort came from out in the hallway, followed by the same thudding from earlier. "All right, give me a moment," I called out. Those drunks. I buckled up my pants and washed my hands, then swung the door open. The hall was empty. I flicked my wet hands and glanced down both ways of the hall to see no one. "Hello?" I called out, wiping my forehead of sweat. Silence. "Gabe? Alice?" I said while walking down the hall towards the staircase. This didn't make sense. It had to be one of them pulling some joke on me. The floors needed a key to get in at this hour. It had to be someone who had access to the building. I opened the door to the stairwell and looked up and down the steps. No one. This end of the hall was clear. I closed the door and picked up my pace and hurried down the other end of the hallway. The heat continued to rise, leaving me a soaking mess. "This joke isn't funny anymore," I shouted while reaching the other end of the hall. No one. Every office was locked, as it should be. I was stumped. "Clearly I'm working too late," I mumbled to myself. Despite the heat, I had to get the work done. Even though I had a laptop, I needed the files that were on the server. There was no option other than to work in this overheating environment. Sighing, I returned to the office while airing out my shirt, I entered the office, noticing an intense gray haze that started to loom over the space. I took a sniff to smell the subtle scent of smoke. Smoke? Heat? It finally hit me. The building was on fire. Instantly, I clued in that I had left my smartphone on the bathroom counter. Without hesitation, I rushed to leave the office to get my cell phone. Before I could make it to the office entrance, a large pile of wood collapsed in front of it, blocking me from exiting. Intense heat, piercing flames, and smoke shot through the cracks of the collapsed timber, forcing me to shield myself with my arm. A wheezing noise pierced through the sound of flames, followed by the echoing thumping. The smoke thickened drastically, making it difficult to see anything other than a few feet in front of me. I coughed violently while bringing my shirt up to my face, trying to keep my head low. Heavy trotting picked up inside the office, followed by crashing of desks and computers. I looked up to see, through the haze, was the silhouette of a massive steed stomping through the office. What the? I thought. It had to be the lack of oxygen. This was the only logical explanation. The creature galloped towards me, knocking over my desk and sending my laptop to the ground. Flames burst from the animal's nostrils and eye sockets like some sort of hell creature. The animal neighed, while its long mane bounced with each step I made. I jumped to the side, trying to dodge the stopping animal. The attempt was too late. The animal reached my being and moved through me like a spectral. It left a trail of flame with each step of the hoof as it trotted. My face collided into the ground, causing me to skid on the wood. This can't be, I thought to myself. It was the only words I could process. The rest were memories, reminiscences that were not my own. It was as if another entity had pierced into my psyche and was filling my mind with visuals of farmers, horses, and fire. Emotions of fear, agony, and distress washed over my body. The impressions of loss and confusion was all that was left. The fire around me continued to light up until there was nothing but brightness. Not even the heat could be felt anymore. The neighing sound of a horse echoed through my mind, followed by a heavy thud. The poor animal, burned alive, I thought. The creature's agonizing death played through my mind. The animal's soul was communicating with me. It was trapped within these walls. The horse channeled through my being. I was the animal. An instinctual sensation pulsated through my body, and I lifted my head up. Resting on my knees, I screeched an ear-piercing neigh as the fire began to consume my form. "Mark!" a voice echoed in my head. "Christ, Mark!" the voice shouted once more. This time, it was more distinguishable. The sound didn't originate in my head. No. This was my coworker. He was in the room with me. He was in the fire. Gabe! I used all my strength to spring to my feet. Get out of here! I shouted, looking towards the hallway. The office door was wide open. There was no collapsed wood. Alice walked towards me from the doorway, wide-eyed. A hand touched my shoulder, causing me to flinch. "Mark," came Gabe's voice. "What on earth are you screaming about?" I looked over to see the man was beside me. "What?" I asked, glancing around. The fires, the horse, the smoke, all of it was gone. "Are you okay?" Alice asked. I don't know," I said while wiping my face. "You were shouting on your knees," Gabe said while laughing. "This briefing got you that rattled up?" I didn't answer, still looking around the office. Everything was left as is. The desks were upright, and the computers were on top, unharmed. "How?" I thought. "You're drenched in sweat," Alice said. "Maybe you should take the day off tomorrow." "Or maybe the heat hit you," Gabe said. "Lucky we went back up on here to check on you." "Yeah," I said. "It has to be the heat." Did I just shout like a horse? I thought, now feeling sheepish that my coworker had found me in such a bizarre state. I could barely process what had happened to me. Sure, I could tell my coworkers that the whole floor caught fire. Wood began to collapse around me. A horse ghost appeared on the 3rd floor and channeled its essence through me. But that was crazy. Ghosts weren't real. At least, that's what I try to tell myself. If that were true, then what was the vision I had? What was the sensation of oneness I had with a creature I had never met before? Maybe I would never have any answers. I could only accept that what I saw and felt, the impression of an animal in agony, sharing its story with me of burning in the fire at the Mercer Warehouse. And that is March's flash fiction. I hope you enjoy it and share with your friends, and I'll catch you next month for April's flash fiction. Talk to you later.